You can start now.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ به من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is the second part of the life and works of Imam Jafar Al Sadiq. So I ended the last week's presentation by posing a question: why should we study the life and works of Imam Jafar? And by we, I mean the Sunnis. So first of all, let me tell you that the rigid boundaries that we see today between the Sunni and the Shia doctrines were not established during the time of Imam Jafar or even during the time of Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Ash-Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. In fact, Imam Shafi'i was accused of being a Rafidi, who are extremist Shias, who do not have good opinion of the three other Khulafa Rashidun. These differences at the beginning were political and unfortunately subsequently developed into issues of doctrine or theology. But Imam Jafar Sadiq was held in high esteem by the majority of Sunni scholars during his time and even to this day. And as I mentioned last time, that Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik were also among his students. Let me elaborate upon this point. If you read the actual books in Arabic, they will say Akhaza anhu or Akhazu anhu. They took from him, that is from Imam Jafar Sadiq. Now, the word Akhaza, when it comes to the issues of learning, refers to taking knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ would sometimes say, khudu anni, take from me, take from me. That would mean take the knowledge from me, take the knowledge from me. So our scholars, even though they were at a very high level, would travel far and wide in the Islamic countries, in the Islamic state, I would say, to learn from anybody who they thought had good knowledge, who had some hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So they will go and they will attend their lectures. And the way it will be put in the books will be ahaja'an. He took knowledge from so and so. So both Imam Hanifa, Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik took some knowledge from Imam Jafar As-Sadiq. If you look at the life histories of these Aimma, these major scholars, the number of their teachers is astronomically high. Sometimes some would say that they learned from 100 teachers. It doesn't mean that they spent months and months or years and years with one teacher. It means that they went to a scholar, even if he was his junior, and they took some hadith or ahadith or some knowledge. And out of respect, they will refer to that individual as my sheikh or our sheikh. Now, Imam Jafar As-Sadiq, as I mentioned to you, had a very outstanding lineage from both his father's side and from his mother's side. From his father's side, his father was Imam Bakr, who was the son of Imam Zainul Abidin, who was son of Hussein radiallahu ta'ala, who was son of Ali radiallahu ta'ala. And on his mother's side, his mother was Farah. And I actually checked after I gave this talk last week from some of my friends who told me that the majority of Shias still agree and accept that Farah was the great granddaughter of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. Her father was Qasim bin Muhammad, who was the grandson of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. The concept of the hidden Imam, which is like one of the major differences between the Shia and Sunni doctrines, was not there at the time of Imam Jafar As-Sadiq. It came much later when the 11th Imam was killed. Imam Jafar's fiqh was also based upon the Holy Quran and the Sunnah, and we will elaborate upon it, inshallah, today. So there was a disagreement of scholars, and this is from the book by Muhammad Abu Zahra. He says that there has been disagreement after the Sahaba and the Tabi'in. And we find these differences in Imam Zaid ibn Ali, Imam Bakr, Imam Jafar Sadiq, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Awza'i, Imam Les bin Saad, then Shafi'i. Then some of the students of Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa also had differences of opinion. Imam Shafi'i learned from Imam Malik, but he had differences from Imam Malik and went on to establish his own madhab. Similarly, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal learned from a number of scholars, including Imam Shafi'i, whom he held in high respect, but he still established his own madhab. So they mentioned that there was no enmity among them on the basis of the pillars of our deen of Islam. There was no difference of opinion in the yaqeen, but the differences were basically in how they looked at certain aspects of the deen and in the fiqh, which is basically to say that it was not in the central themes of the Islam as a religion. As a religion, they all believed in the same components of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan as come in the Hadith of Jibril from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Quran. Their differences were in the peripheral issues as well as in the explanation of the qawanin, the laws, both in the Quran and in the Hadith, which is the same in Sunni madhab. That all the four Sunni madhab, and actually there is a fifth madhab that I will be talking about later, it's the madhab of Imam Dawud Zahiri, that these Sunni scholars, even the founders of the four Sunni madhab, and Imam Dawud Zahiri, they use the same ayah and same ahadith, and yet they had a difference in how they interpreted, how they based their qiyas upon these texts. So the bottom line comes وإنه لا خلاص إنه لا خلاص الفقهاء في اختلافهم كانوا يقولون رأينا ثواب يحتمل الخطأ ورأينا ورأي غيرنا خطأ يحتمل الصواب. They said that our opinion is correct, but at the same time it is possible that it may be incorrect. And the opinion of those others to us appears to be incorrect, but it is possible that it may be correct. So these differences in the four Sunni madhab and Imam Jafar Al Sadiq at that time were not in the central issues of our deen, Islam. Now, I also want to mention the text of a verdict or a fatwa which was issued by Sheikh Al Akbar Mahmud Shaltut, who was head of the Al Azhar University, the Sheikh Al Azhar, on permissibility of following the Shia Al Imamiyya school of thought in fiqh. This fatwa was issued on July 6, 1959. It was a controversial fatwa. It still remains a controversial fatwa. It was sort of put on the back burner at one time, but it has been rejuvenated as well. I will just read out this fatwa. It does not represent my opinion because at an academic level, when I'm giving you different opinions, I try not to superimpose my opinion on that. So the fatwa is read like this, and you can check it on Google. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. The fatwa is in Arabic as well, which is available. Islam does not require a Muslim to follow a particular madhab or school of thought. Rather, we say, and again, this is the fatwa that I'm quoting, it is not my opinion. Rather, we say every Muslim has the right to follow one of the schools of thought which has been correctly narrated and its verdicts have been compiled in its books. And everyone who is following such madahib or schools of thought can transfer to another school, and there shall be no crime on him for doing so. What it means is that a Sunni, as a Hanafi, may choose to follow the opinion of Imam Ash-Shafi'i or Imam Malik or Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal in a certain issue differing from his own madhab, and it doesn't mean that he does not remain a Muslim. The Jafari school of thought, which is also known as Ashia al-Imamiyya al-Ithna Ashariya, the 12 Imam Shiats, is a school of thought that is religiously correct to follow in worship, as are other Sunni schools of thought. This is the fatwa issued from Al-Azhar, Jami Al-Azhar, and it was given by the Sheikh Al-Azhar at that time, Mahmud Shaltut. He goes on to say, the Muslims must know this and ought to refrain from unjust prejudice to any particular school of thought, since the religion of Allah and His divine law, Sharia, was never restricted to a particular school of thought. Their jurists, mujtahidun, are accepted by Almighty Allah, and it is permissible to the non-mujtahid to follow them and to accord with their teaching, whether in worship, which is ibadat, or transactions, which is in muamalat. And as I mentioned, this fatwa was issued on July 6, 1959 from Al-Azhar University. It remains controversial to this day. It was sort of abrogated at one time in Egypt, but in the last few years, it has come back to prominence. And again, this is not my opinion. I'm simply explaining it. Now, Imam Jafar, as I mentioned, was highly regarded by Sunni scholars, and I will give you some examples here. So, there is an encyclopedia of Islamic scholars compiled by Imam al Zahabi, Sunni. It's called Tazkiratul Huffaz. It's an encyclopedia of scholars, basically. And he writes Imam Jafar Al Sadiq in these words. I'm simply quoting Jafar bin Muhammad bin Ali ibn Shahid Al Hussein ibn Ali bin Abi Talib Al Hashimi, Ridwanullah alayhi majmain, Al Imam Abu Abdullah Al Alawi Al Madani Al Sadiq, Ahadus Sadatul Alam. He was one of the pillars or the signpost, one of the chief signposts. Wa Ibn Binte Al Qasim bin Muhammad, and he was the son of daughter of Al Qasim bin Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, as we know. Wa Ummuhi hiya Asma binte Abdul Rahman bin Abi Bakr, and her mother, the mother of Farah, was Asma binte Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr. فلذلك كان يقول ولدني أبو بكر الصديق مرتين. The Imam al-Zahabi mentioned that Imam Jafar would to say this with pride that Abu Bakr gave birth to me. It will be like a literal translation. Abu Bakr Siddiq gave birth to me twice, which means I share my lineage with Abu Bakr Siddiq through two ways, both ways, from my mother as well as from my father. And the reason is that his grandfather, Qasim bin Muhammad, was the son of Muhammad, who was the son of Abu Bakr Siddiq. And Imam Jafar's mother, Farah, was the daughter of Asma bint Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr. So here, the lineage of two sons of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu comes at a central point. So that's why he said, Waladani Abu Bakr Siddiq marratain. And he narrated Hadasa an Jaddihi al Qasim. He narrated from his grandfather Al Qasim, one Abihi Abi Jafar al Baqir, and he also narrated from his father, who was Imam Baqir, wa Ubaidullah bin Abi Rafi, he was a Sahabi, wa Urwatu bin Zubair, another Sahabi, wa Ata wa Nafi wa Idda. So Imam Jafar also learned from people like Ata and Nafi. And Nafi was a teacher of Imam Malik. Nafi was one of the prime students of Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and Atta bin Abi Rabaha was, like you can say, the Qadi of Makkah. He was a Tabai, very highly respected Tabai. Even Imam Abu Hanifa also learned from him. Wa anhu. Now it is anhu means those who learned from Jafar. So now we come to the students of Imam Jafar Al Sadiq. Malik, Imam Malik was Sufyanan. There were two Sufyan, Sufyan Sauri and Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Sufyan Suri actually had a madhab of his own as well. So you can see that leading scholars, Sunni scholars, including Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Sufyan al-Thawri, Sufyan bin Uyayna, Hatim bin Ismail, wa Yahya al-Qattan, wa Abu Asim al-Nubil, wa khalqun kathirun. A large number of people learned from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq. Ila Mauluduhu Sanat Samanin, and it is said that he was born in the year 80. Fazahir Annahu Ra Suhail ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi, that he saw Sa'd ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi. Fasaqaw Shafi'i wa Yahya bin Mu'in, and Imam Shafi'i and Yahya bin Mu'in both consider him to be a reliable person. Imam Abu Hanifa said, Ma ra'aytu afqa min Jafar bin Muhammad. I have not seen anybody more with more juristic knowledge, more discerning of knowledge than Jafar bin Muhammad, Imam Jafar. And he said, Inna alamun nasi alamuhum bi ikhtilafin nas. We'll talk about this story, that the most knowledgeable person is one who is aware of the differences of opinion among scholars. And there is a story about it that Imam Abu Hanifa was asked a question. He went to Imam Jafar with the Khalifa Mansur, who will come to that, and Imam Jafar was able to answer all the questions. Abu Hatim mentioned, Saqatun, la yus'alu an mithlihi. He was extremely reliable person. What are the other opinions of scholars? Now, it is mentioned, Wakana yaghdabu min al-Rafida. Imam Jafar was actually not happy with the people who are known as al-Rafida or Rawafid. As I mentioned, that there were different groups even among the followers of Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. There were some who were moderate, there were some who were extremist, and some of them did not approve of Abu Bakr, Umar, and Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhum ajmain. So Imam Jafar was not among them. He was in fact unhappy with them. ويمقتهم إذا علم أنهم يتعرضون لجده أبي بكر ظاهرا وباطنا. And he would be angry if he found out that they were objecting to his grandfather Abu Bakr either openly or secretly, because Abu Bakr was his great grandfather. And Imam Jafar did not narrate too many hadiths except from his father, who was Imam Baqir. وَكَانَ مِنْ جِلَّةِ عُلَمَاءِ الْمَدِينَةِ. And they were both top among the top scholars of Medina. And Ishaq bin Rahwiya, he was a major student of Imam Ash-Shafi'i. And he said, قُلْتُ لِلشَّافِعِ فِي مُنَازَرَةٍ جَرَتْ, that I asked Imam Ash-Shafi'i in a juristic debate that was going on, and I said, Kaifa Jafar bin Muhammad indaka? What is your opinion about Jafar bin Muhammad? And he said, Qala Thaqa. He said, he's reliable. Now, Siyar Alamun Nubala is another encyclopedia of Islamic scholars, and I've quoted extensively from this book when discussing about the four Sunni Aimma. He says, Wakana Abdulun Nas. He was one of the best of people. Wa alamuhum bidinillah. And he was the most knowledgeable of them about the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wakana min alil ilm alladhina sami'u minhu idha ra'u anhu qalu akhbarna al alim. And he was among those people of knowledge, that those who learned from him, when they would report from him, they would say, Akhbarna al alim, the knowledgeable one notified us. That is, we learn from a knowledgeable person, we learn from an alim, from a scholar. And Imam Malik would say, Innahu kana min al ulama zuhadil lazina yakhshawna Allah. He is one of those scholars who have the zuhud, who are the people who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, there is an incident that I would like to mention. It is worth mentioning, and it comes from Hassan bin Ziyad, who was one of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa. So he asked Imam Abu Hanifa that I heard Imam Abu Hanifa when he was asked, Man afqa min man raita? Who is the most knowledgeable person that you have seen? And Imam Abu Hanifa said, Ma raitu ahadan afqa min Jafar bin Muhammad. He said, I have not seen anybody more knowledgeable juristically than Jafar bin Muhammad. So he was asked, why? Why do you say this? So he said that Al-Mansur, Abu Jafar al-Mansur, the Abbasi caliph, came to Hira, and he had Imam Abu Hanifa summoned to his court. And he said, O Abu Hanifa, people have been put into fitna through Jafar bin Ibn Muhammad. As I mentioned, that Imam Jafar was under surveillance of Abbasis because they feared him. So he said, Fayya lahu min masalik su'ab. So I have a hayya lahu min masalik su'ab. Said, bring some very difficult questions. Get ready some very difficult questions so that we can go and really judge if Imam Jafar is really a scholar. So he said that Imam Abu Hanifa said that I collected 40 difficult issues. And he said that then we went to Abu Jafar, Imam Jafar. So, and he said that Abu Jafar al Mansur and I both went, and Jafar was sitting on the right of Abu Mansur al Jafar. And he said, when I saw both of them, then dakhalani le Jafar min al haybati ma la yadkhuluni li Abi Jafar, that I was more in awe of Jafar bin Muhammad, Imam Jafar Sadiq, than Abu Jafar al Mansur. He had such an appearance, such a powerful appearance. He said, Fasallamtu wa adana lahu. I said salam to him and he gave me the permission. So then I sat down. Look at the respect. This is what we need to learn. A scholar approaching another scholar, saying salam, waiting for permission before he could sit down. So ثم التفت إلى جعفر. Then I turned to Jafar and فقال يا أبا عبد الله تعرف هذا. No, Abu Mansur actually turned to Jafar and say, Oh Abu Abdullah, do you know? And he said, yes, I know, this is Imam Abu Hanifa. So then he followed what they had brought, the question that they followed. So they started asking him different questions. And Imam Jafar's answers would be like, Antum taquluna fiha kaza wa kaza. You, he's referring to Imam Abu Hanifa, so people of Kufa, you say this and this on this issue. Wa ahlul Madina yaquluna kaza wa kaza. And the people of Medina say this and that. Wa nahnu naqulu kaza wa kaza. And we say this and this. Farubama tabana wa rubama taba ahlul Madina. So sometimes we follow you and sometimes people follow us from the Ahlul Madina. So now Imam Jafar is very well aware of the differences of opinion of different Islamic of the scholars of different Islamic centers. Imam Abu Hanifa, the Kufan group, the people of Medina, Imam Malik's group, you can say, and then his own knowledge as well. And in some issues we follow, and some issues people follow us. And sometimes we oppose all of them. It means that we have a different opinion. So he said all 40 questions were all answered. And then Imam Abu Hanifa said, Alaysa qad rawina anna alamun nas alamuhum bi ikhtilaf nas. Didn't we tell you that the most knowledgeable people is one who is most knowledgeable about the differences of opinion of scholars? So you can imagine that. So now there is a letter that Abu Mansur Jafar sent to Imam Jafar. And he said, why don't you come to us like most people come to us? So Imam Jafar was not a kind of person who will be visiting the court of the kings. So the king is writing a letter, why don't you come to us like others come? And he said, I will read it in Arabic and maybe the English translation. لَيْسَ لَنَا مَا نَخَافُكَ وَلَا إِنَّكَ مِنْ أَمْرِ الْآخِرَةِ مَا نَرْجُكَ لَهُ وَلَا أَنْتَ فِي نِعْمَةٍ فَنُحَنِّئُكَ بِهَا وَلَا تَرَاهَا نُقْمَةً فَنُعَزِّيَكَ بِهَا فَمَا نَسْنَعُ أَنْكَ فَكَتَبَ إِلَيْهِ تُصَاحِبْنَا لَتَنْصَحَنَا فَأَجَابَهُ مَنْ أَرَادَ الدُّنْيَا لَا يَنْسَهُكَ. It's a beautiful response. Man arada dunya la yansahuka wa man arada al-akhirata la yashabuka. The English translation. So Abu Mansur said, why don't you approach us as the people approach us? And Imam Jafar answered, there is nothing for which we fear you. So we don't need to come to you and apologize to you. Nor do you have anything of the hereafter that we would seek for you for. That there is nothing you can advise us that will improve our akhirah. Neither are you in a blessing such that we should congratulate you. You haven't done anything remarkable that we should come and congratulate you. Nor do you see it as a burden such that we should send you our condolences. Remarkable answer. So what would we do at your place? Now Mansur writes back, you would accompany us to advise us. I think he was playing a kind of a strategic trick on him. And Imam Sadiq's response was decisive. The one who wants this world would not advise you, because otherwise you would kill him, basically. And the one who wants the hereafter would not accompany you. What would we gain from accompanying you that will be of use to us in the akhirah? And I said, this is marvelous response. Now, what was Imam Jafar's opinion about Abu Bakr and Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala? As I mentioned, that in those days there was a group called Rafidis who did not have a good opinion of the other Khulafa, but Imam Jafar's opinion. So here it comes that who said that the Jafar came to them and they were about to leave Medina, and they said, Innakum inshallah min sali ahle misrakum, that you are among the best people of your town. So when you reach them, فَأَبْلَغُوهُمْ anni, then you give them my message, that whoever thinks that I am Imam Masum, I am infallible, whose obedience is obligatory, then I am bari from him. I have nothing to do with him. And whoever thinks that I have nothing to do with Abu Bakr and Umar, then I am free from him, which means I do not do the tabarru from Abu Bakr and Umar. I hold them in respect. And if anybody thinks that I'm among them, then no, I'm not among them. Now, Darqutni also mentioned that Samaitu Jafar bin Muhammad was Soila an Abi Bakr wa Umar, that I heard Jafar bin Muhammad and he was asked about Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma, and he said, Innaka tas'alani an rajulaini qad akala min thimaril jannah, that you're asking me about two people who have indeed eaten from the fruits of Jannah. Now, there is we had discussed in detail the issue of the createdness of the Holy Quran. So I will mention from Jafar bin Muhammad as well. He said, Laysa bi khaliq wala makhluq. I apologize for the typographical error here. That it is not the creator and it is not the created thing, but walakinnahu kalamullah. So he also, like the majority of Sunni scholars, did not think that Quran has been created, but his opinion was the same, that it is kalamullah, it's with Allah. Imam Jafar as a hadith narrator. Do we have ahadith reported from Imam Jafar in the Sunni collections of ahadith? So yes, Ashabu Sunan, Sunan Abu Dawud, At-Tirmidhi, An-Nasai, Ibn Majah, Darqutni, and even Imam Muslim have narrated ahadith from Imam Jafar. So if he was not a reliable person, why would 5 out of 6 compilers of the Sihah Sitta narrate from him? And he was Wakana min Istaqat in the Ahlul Hadith, in the Ahlul Hadith. He was one of the reliable narrators for the people who are called the Ahlul Hadith, the collectors of Ahadith. And Ibn Hibban, another Hadith scholar, said, Kana min Sadat Ahlul Bayt, Fuqaha wa ulama yuhtajju bi hadithai. He was among the chiefs of the Ahlul Bayt, Fuqaha and ulama, and his ahadith, the ahadith which are reported from him, can be used as dalil. And As-Saji said, Kana sudukan ma'munan. He was extremely trustworthy. He was absolutely truthful. And إذا حدث عن الثقات فحديثه مستقيم. And when he's narrating from reliable person, then his reports are mustaqim. They are straightforward, they are acceptable, they are correct. Now, people raise an issue that Imam Bukhari in his Sahih al-Jami has not included any hadith from Imam Jafar. So did he consider Imam Jafar to be unreliable? Let's look at it. The question arises, why amongst all the 6 books there should be no hadith from Imam Jafar Al Sadiq in the Sahih al-Bukhari. Now, it cannot be that Imam al-Bukhari regarded the traditions as in and amongst themselves unacceptable. That is the traditions of Imam Jafar. Because we do find a significant number of ahadith from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq in another collection of Imam al-Bukhari known as Al-Adab al-Mufrad. It's a book about the manners. It's a shorter book as compared with the Sahih al-Bukhari, but it has a large number of ahadith, hundreds of ahadith, probably thousands of ahadith, and Imam Bukhari has included ahadith reported by Imam Jafar in it. So it can be said, therefore, that although Imam Jafar as-Sadiq's hadiths are absent from Sahih al-Bukhari, still Imam Bukhari, rahmahullah, did regard him as an authoritative transmitter of hadith. So I will just touch very briefly upon some principles of Jafari fiqh. I'm not very knowledgeable. I'm a Sunni and I follow the Hanafi fiqh. So Imam Jafar threw light on the following issues. So as I mentioned last week, that we Sunnis believe that Imam Shafi'i was the first compiler of authoritative text on principles of fiqh, which is true. But the Hanafis also mentioned that the principles of fiqh were in vogue even before Imam Shafi'i, and Hanafis also had some principles of fiqh, but they did not formally write a book, did not write a formal book on it. Now, Imam Bakr and Imam Jafar both are reported by Sunni scholars that they had also developed the principles of fiqh. So it's a parallel effort, because basically this is what one we can say. Imam Shafi gets the credit by writing a book on it. So Imam Jafar Sadiq, laid down the conditions and prerequisites of ijtihad, the permission of following another person in taqlid, the annotative value of the apparent meaning of the words, by which it means that if the Quran and Hadith, there is a text in the Quran and Hadith, and the text is composed of the words, we can go on the apparent meaning of the word rather than dwell upon the hidden meanings. The permissibility of action according to the general and absolute senses, permissibility of framing secondary injunctions and finding out secondary rule from the basic principles. And this is one of the principles of qiyas and ijtihad, which Imam Shafi, Imam Abu Hanifa have also used. Then he talked about the action, the amal, permissibility of reporting the traditions according to the meaning and not the words, which is indirect narration. Now, this is an important issue. Some of the Sunni hadith scholars have laid down a very important condition, that a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ should be or must be reported in exact words that the Prophet ﷺ used. But it's kind of very difficult. The Sahaba, we can say the Sahaba who a Sahabi who heard directly from the Prophet ﷺ, most likely preserved it in exact words. But thereafter, from Sahabi to Tabai to Taba Tabai, and then a lot of other people, it is hard to imagine that all of them were actually reporting exactly the same words. Many times, the implied meaning is reported, but in different words. So Imam Jafar actually had this ruling of permissibility of reporting the traditions according to the meaning and not the words, which would be called indirect narration. He also talked about impermissibility of imposing an action upon a person which is far beyond his capacity. And it is very consistent with the verse of the Quran, La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha. So in juristic matters, a faqih should not give a verdict which is difficult for an individual who is asking if there is an easier option as well. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ, when he was given two options, he will choose the easier one. Then the next is obligation to refrain from that which is doubtful. It's an important issue, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is al halalu bayyan wal haramu bayyan. That halal is clear, haram is clear. In between, there are shades of gray. There are gray areas which are doubtful. So, according to Imam Jafar, it's an obligation to refrain from that which is doubtful. And again, it is consistent with the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The admissibility of reasoning with reference to a precedent, that is qiyas, and admissibility of reasoning with reference to a precedent mentioned in the Quran and Hadith, and non-admissibility of analogous inferences or guesswork, that is al-qiyas. So Imam Jafar did not go with al-qiyas, which is again not something unique to him. There are many Sunni scholars who also have limited the jurisdiction of qiyas, particularly Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So in Fiqh Jafariya, it is obligatory to refer to the Holy Quran and the Sunnah. Again, very important, Quran and the Sunnah. These are the two prime evidences in any Sunni madhab. All four Aimma, or even if you want to include Imam Dawud Zahiri, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, or current day scholars, Quran and Hadith, Quran and Sunnah are must in order to deduce the results or the judgment and give judgment, as well as that the apparent meaning are sufficient for the sake of reasoning and admissible. And Zahiri Madhab actually follows this thing, Imam Ibn Hazm and Ash-Shawkani as well. Imam Sadiq rahmahullah prohibited the use of analogy and guesswork in arriving at judgment. This is where there is a difference of opinion between him and Imam Abu Hanifa particularly. In the same way, he declared it permissible to act in accordance with the general and absolute, as well as the admissibility of framing rules on the basis of fundamental principles and abstract rules. This is for scholars, so I will not dwell upon it further. Now, the issue of Imam Jafar's death, and this is from Muhammad Abu Zahra's book. So he is using these words. I will read the Arabic. Istamar al Imam Sadiq yunadilu fi sabil al-Islam mujahidan. So Imam Muhammad Abu Zahra is saying that Imam Sadiq remained a mujahid of Islam throughout his life. وَلَكِنَّهُ لَمْ يَحْمِلْ سَيْفًا, but he did not carry a sword, which means his jihad was not jihad with sword. His jihad was وَكَانَ جِهَادُهُ هُوَ الْجِهَادُ الْأَكْبَرُ. His jihad was Jihadul Akbar, and he's referring to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the Rajana min al Jihadil Asghari ila Jihadil Akbar. We have returned from minor jihad, which was the war actually, a ghazwa, to the Akbar jihad, the greater jihad, which is huwa zabtun nafs an ahwaiha, to control yourself from the desires, the basal desires of a human being. Wal irshad wa talim, and guiding the people to the right path and giving them knowledge. Was sabrul alal ada wa alal dunun, and being patient on the persecution that he suffered and the guesswork and the people's zan about him that Maazallah, he was not a good person. Wa alal ladina yanharifuna, and from people who were doing tahrif in the religion of Islam. Wa yubaddaluna al-haqa'iq al-islamiyya, who were bent upon changing the truth of Islam. Was sabruhu alayhim kana bil muqafatil ila ikhraj dalal min ruusihim, and his patience on them on struggle to remove the deviation from their leaders. فمن حضر منهم إليهم كان للقاء وما يمسك منه من نور الهداية أسره ومن غاب منهم كانت كتابته تقوم مقام عبارته. So those who met with him, They were guided by the light of guidance from him, and those who were not fortunate enough to meet him could still learn from his writings. So he said, فَكَانَ مَيْدَانُ الْجِهَادِ لِذَلِكَ الْإِمَامُ الْجَلِيلُ تَصْحِيحُ الْاعْتِقَادِ. So the field of jihad for this Jalil, this great honorable Imam, was correction of Aqidah, وَبَيَانُ الشَّرْ, and explanation of the Sharia, وَبَيَانُ الْحَقِّ فِي الْأُمُورِ, and to explain the truth in matters, وَالصَّبْرُ عَلَى الظُّنُونِ, and be patient on what people would think about him, وَلَيْسَ لَهُ نَاصِرٌ إِلَّا اللَّهُ الْعَلِيُّ الْقَدِيرُ, and he did not have any helper except Allah. So he said that he died radiyam mardiyan sabiran shakiran. He died in a state that Allah was happy with him and he was happy with Allah. He was patient, he was grateful, and it happened in the Shawwal of 148. This tribute is coming from a Sunni Egyptian scholar, Muhammad Abu Zahra, who has written the biographies of Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Ibn Hazm. So this tribute is coming from a really learned person. Now, was Imam Jafar poisoned? Some report that he was poisoned at the order of Abu Jafar al-Mansur, but I found a contradictory report in a reputable book of Islamic history compiled by Yaqubi. So he mentioned from Ismail bin Ali bin Abdullah bin Abbas. So Ismail was one of the descendants of Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhumma. He said that I went to Abu Jafar al-Mansur one day and I found that his beard was wet with tears. And he told me that, do you know that what happened, what trouble has happened with your people? Abdullah bin Ismail was from one of the Ahl Bayt, and Imam Jafar was also from Ahl Bayt. So he said, do you know what happened, what trouble, what fitna, what disaster has happened to your family? And he said, what is that? He said, Sayyiduhum, their chief of Ahl Bayt, wa alimuhum, and their scholar, wa baqiyatul akhyar minhum, and the remaining good person from them, tuwaffa, he has passed away. This is the description. It says, Waman huwa ya Amirul Mu'minin. Who was he? And it says, Jafar bin Muhammad. So it says, Azam Allahu ajra Amirul Mu'minin wa ta'ala lana baqahu. So this is how they will address the Khalifa, that may Allah increase your ajr and may Allah give you long life. And then he said, Inna Jafar kana mimman qala lahu fi thumma awrana al-kitab alladhina istafayna min ibadina. The king is quoting from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Imam Jafar was one of those people about whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that then we gave or vouchsafed the book to the people that we selected from our servants. And he said, وَكَانَ مِمَّنِ اسْتَفَى اللَّهِ. He was one of those people who were chosen by Allah. وَكَانَ مِنَ السَّابِقِينَ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ. And he was one of those people who have gone away, who have taken all the good ones, who have exceeded us. So I've just completed the second lecture about Imam Jafar Al Sadiq. I found his life to be inspirational. If we leave aside our differences that have divided the Muslim Ummah over the last 1400 years, I think there is a lot to learn from each other. People who are followers of Ali radiallahu ta'ala and Ahlul Bayt can learn a lot from the Sunni scholars and Sunni fiqh. And similarly, there's nothing wrong in learning from the life of people like Zainul Abidin, son of Hussein radiallahu ta'ala, grandson of Ali radiallahu ta'ala and Fatima radiallahu ta'ala, and Imam Jafar, Imam Baqir. These were scholars of Islam during their time. They were in Medina, the city of the Prophet ﷺ. They were teaching there. They had followers over there. They learned from the Sahaba and the Tabi'in who were Sunni. And they had students who went on to become some of the major scholars of Islam and Sunni Madhab. So I don't find any problem learning. If I can, the Prophet ﷺ said that, don't look at who is saying, but look at what is being said. So if something is full of hikmah, something is based upon Quran and Sunnah, something that can help me become a better person, I have no problem learning from him. So I finished the life history of Imam Jafar. It was a very brief one. I'll be taking the next week off, but inshallah, then Imam Asif Irani has asked me to continue with this series of lectures and then talk about Imam Hazm al-Zahiri as well as Imam Ibn Taymiyyah and other scholars. So inshallah, I have a lot to study before I can prepare and present. May Allah forgive me for any mistakes that I may have made. May Allah reward all of our Islamic scholars who kept the deen of Allah alive, and they have added their wisdom to the knowledge which they learned, and they passed on that knowledge which they learned from Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajmain, and from whom Tabi'in, and all of them learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our knowledge. Rabbana zidna ilma, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to act upon this knowledge and benefit from it in this dunya and in the akhirah. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.